3 secret weapons if you're pulled over for DUI in Washington State. Are you interested in the criminal law? Are you worried you might get a DUI one day? Do you just want to know a few secret weapons to think about and how to improve your chances if you are pulled over for DUI? If so, this is the video for you. So my name is Lance Fryrear, and I'm a defense attorney in Linwood, Washington. I've been defending people charged with crimes for more than 20 years, and I was a prosecutor for 7 years before that. So me and my team, we know a lot about DUI. And if you find this video useful, please like and please subscribe, because more people will get the information they need. So this video is informational. It's not legal advice. It's a few things to think about and to consider in case you ever get pulled over for a DUI. Now, I hope you don't. The simplest way to not ever need any information is to not put yourself in that position, right? One drink and driving is enough to get you charged with a DUI in Washington State. There's also marijuana DUIs, there's prescription DUIs, there's lots of ways to get a DUI. And I'm going to just go over 3 or so. I think I've got an extra one at the end, an extra tip if you stay to the end. 3 secret weapons to help yourself into your DUI. So let's just, move right along. So you're driving down the road. It's in the middle of the night. It's shooting fish in a barrel time for the police. It's 1 a.m. and you get pulled over. Now the officer comes up to your window and, you roll down the window. They smell alcohol. They ask if you've been drinking. You said, I've had a couple. And then the officer says, hey, would you like to do some voluntary field sobriety tests to see if you're okay to drive? And so that's where I get to secret weapon number 1. Typically speaking, it's best to not do field sobriety tests. You're going to make your own decision. But as a defense attorney, if my client asks me in general, should I do a field sobriety test? If asked, my answer to my clients is always no. And why is that? Well, field sobriety tests are subjective. They are totally subjective based upon what the police officer sees or what the police officer wants to see. They're also, in my opinion, very difficult and very unfair. Now, myself and the majority of the lawyers that work with me, we've been trained in field sobriety tested. We've taken the same classes as the officers. And there's 3 field sobriety tests you're going to be asked to do. And let me tell you, it's a pet peeve of mine. Clients call me, people on the phone. I passed the field sobriety test. Pretty much never see it because it's so subjective. An officer asked to do a field sobriety test, asks you if you want to do one, because it helps build their case and justify the arrest decision. You're not supposed to be guilty if you just drink and drive. You're only supposed to be guilty of DUI if you're under the influence and driving. And so these field sobriety tests, which are so subjective, are a way that an officer can later justify his or her decision for arrest. So there's the horizontal gaze nystagmus test, where it's looking for involuntary jerking of the eyes. There's a walk and turn test, which is 9 heel-to-toe steps down the line and return taking 9 heel-to-toe steps. And there's a standing on one leg test, where you have to stand on one leg and count out loud 1001, 1002, and so forth until an officer tells you to stop. And in each of those tests, police officers are looking for certain clues or cues, depending on who you ask, about whether or not you passed the test. And we've got a separate video on field sobriety tests, but the bottom line is you hear the instructions once. They're often not instructed correctly. They're done in the dark. They're done on the side of the road. They're done in a pressure situation where you don't even really understand what the officer is saying because you've never done it before. And you're held to such a high standard of performance on a test that you don't even know what's important. It is impossible to pass. Probably even impossible to pass stone cold sober. And that's my belief. So secret weapon number 1, do not agree to do voluntary field sobriety tests. And if the officer smells alcohol and you don't do the field sobriety test, you're probably going to get arrested, but in my opinion, you're probably going to get arrested anyway. So after the arrest, they're going to take you to the typically a station and ask you to do a breath test. a test of your breath or sometimes a test of your blood. And during that period of time, somewhere in there, an officer is going to read your rights, tell you about your right to an attorney, and that is secret weapon number 2. Secret weapon number 2 is once you get to the station, make sure that you tell the officer you want to speak to an attorney prior to deciding whether or not to take a breath test. You have that right. And I'd say out of if 10 people come into my office for a DUI, maybe 1 is asked to speak to an attorney. And most of the time we don't do that because we want to be cooperative and, we've never been in trouble before and, why I don't want to look bad or I'm nervous. Well, you want to ask to speak to an attorney so that attorney can try to help you decide what to do. And the other part of this secret weapon number 2 is asking to speak to an attorney is what you need to do is you need to ask the officer for privacy, right? Ask the officer for privacy. If you ask the officer for privacy in speaking to your attorney and the officer does not grant you privacy, that might get your breath test thrown out. Because let's face it, you need to be able to speak clearly and frankly and honestly to that defense attorney who you have a privilege with where they can't tell anyone anything. And if an officer is listening in, you can't do that, right? How could you speak frankly when the defense attorney says, well, how much have you had to drink? If an officer's listening in, you're going to minimize. You're not going to tell the truth, and therefore that's not a proper consultation of an attorney. So you need to ask for an attorney, and you have to ask for privacy. So if that privacy is violated, that could benefit your case. I hope that makes sense. Moving right on, secret weapon number 3 is quit talking. Don't answer the DUI interview questions. You need to be polite. You need to be, you need to tell your name, address, stuff like that. But when asked if you want to do the DUI interview questions, we would certainly tell our clients don't answer those questions. There's about 31, 32 questions that are on the standard Washington State Patrol form that all the police use in Washington State. And those questions are not designed to help you. They're not there just for information because, they want to know more about you. They're there to cut off your defenses. What do you mean, Lance? What are some examples? Well, without looking, what time do you think it is? Well, if you have the time totally wrong, you must be drunk, right? Are you under the care of a doctor or a dentist? Well, you don't think of much. I'm not under the care of a doctor. Well, when you later claim you got back problems, and that's why you couldn't do the field test because you do have back problems, but you happen to say you weren't under the care of a doctor, whatever that means, now they can use that against you. Well, how many hours of sleep did you have last night? Well, if you say you got plenty of sleep, you got 10 hours of sleep, but really you're tired, you didn't think about it right, well, your bad driving wasn't because you were tired, it's because you were drunk, because look, you got plenty of sleep, right? So question after question is designed to cut off defenses, show you confused, things like that. They're not asking those questions for your health. They're asking you those questions for their case. So secret weapon number 3 is do not answer the DUI interview questions. So those are the 3 sort of secret weapons I promised. And this other one, I'm not going to call a secret weapon because I can't really, tell you what to do about it, but I can tell you some things that the state has to show to make a breath test valid. Okay, the state needs to show that you understood your implied consent warnings. Implied consent warnings basically are read to someone when they're being asked for a breath or blood test after they've been stopped for driving under the influence, suspicion of that. Because the legislature has said we impliedly consent to a test of our breath or blood if we're suspected of DUI. We have the right to withdraw that consent, but if so, it gives us a loss of license, a worse loss of driver's license than otherwise. And so the law says that if a driver expresses confusion about the implied consent warnings, then the police officer has to try to fix that. And oftentimes they won't. So if you're confused because it's a bunch of gobbledygook, okay, it's a big old thing, you have to read. If you're confused, tell them you're confused. If you're not, don't. But if you're confused, tell them you're confused. Officer, I'm confused. Can you explain this to me? don't be difficult, but you have the right to understand it. That's your rights. And don't be bashful about it, okay? And then another corollary is the officer has to show that you didn't have anything in your mouth for the 15 minutes prior to the breath test, right? And also from that period until the end of the breath test, minus the mouthpiece you have to blow in. So just remember, the officer has to show that. Just keep track in your head. Did you put anything in your mouth? Did the officer leave your presence after a mouth check? Did something happen? There's going to be a video sometimes that your attorney can ask for, but I just want you to pay attention. So it's not necessarily a secret weapon besides using, your powers of observation to remember what happened. These are all things that can help you have a better chance of a better result if you're being pulled over for a DUI. I hope you're never in that situation because, DUI driving is very dangerous and very destructive. But there are rules that have been set up, and we expect the state to follow those rules. So I hope you found this useful. If so, please like and please subscribe. More people will get this information. And if you find yourself in this situation, you've got a licensing hearing, you've been suspected of DUI, and you need some help, feel free to give my office a call. We've been doing this for more than 20 years. If it makes sense, we'll set you an appointment. We'll listen to what happened. We'll identify a way forward, and we will be there for you. Thank you.